Muy buenas noches a todos y muchas gracias por acompañarnos en esta velada andalusí, fundamentalmente. El motivo de organizar esta conferencia-concierto, de alguna modo
Holding this talk concert is quite an unusual event in our program because either we have talks or we have concerts. We don't usually have an event that combines the two things. But the reason, as I said, for doing this is that we would like to really delve much deeper into Andalus music. There are groups in our countries that do pick up on the influences of Andalus music, Arabic music. In Spain, certainly, this is a term that is often confused. People are very confused about what it means, Al-Andalus music. So that's why we brought along people here who can really give you much more information about what this is about. You're going to be able to hear this music, and you're going to be able to ask them, is it the same as Arabic music? Is it only music linked to the time of Al-Andalus in Spain, or is it something completely different? So we'll be hearing from the performers. Here we have Luis Delgado with us, a very, very famous expert in early music. He is famous for the music and the instruments he uses. We have César Carazo as well, who's also worked with Eduardo Paniagua, who is famous in early music. One of the great experts here in Casa, who've been here with us in Casa Árabe, so this is a wonderful introduction for you. I'd also like to welcome our director, Eduardo Busquets, to the stage. Thank you very much, Nuria. Thank you very much for joining us at this event. First of all, because one of the goals we have in Casa Árabe is to really try and make sure that the culture of Al-Andalus goes beyond the Andalusian territory. We've often talked about this. Al-Andalus, of course, in different moments in time in history, was so important. We're very interested in taking this beyond the territorial aspect. And then we're also very keen to hold an event like this because of the conceptual idea. It's very important for us to develop these ideas. In fact, on the 5th of March, in Cordoba, in Casa Árabe, there'll be a symposium held on Arabic music, which is the continuation of endeavors that we have been making both in Madrid and Cordoba, together with other institutions. The Musical Institute in Valencia, Mediterranean Institute of Music too. So those are two reasons why we're holding this event. And thirdly, we have some excellent experts here to give the talk. We're interested in the fusion side of music, classical music, fusing with music from the Arab world. And we're also keen to bring in the idea of Arab countries and where the presence is there.
Organizar eventos de marca importante. Por tanto, insisto, una gran noche y por eso ya doy la entrada a los.
We are delighted to be able to pick up on all of these concepts here, and we hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias a todos. Buenas tardes. Es
Thank you
un
very much to
placer teneros
everyone. Good
aquí, ver
evening. It's a
la
great
sala
pleasure
llena,
to be
ver el
able to
interés que
see
despierta
such
la
a
música
full room
andalusí.
here. It's
Es de
wonderful. The
obligado cumplimiento dar las
Al-Andalus
gracias a
music
Casa Árabe,
is
que nos
really
permite
giving rise to so much interest. And thank you so much to Casa Árabe for giving us a chance to be here with you on stage and to play you some pieces from our repertoire.
Se trata de la Mshalia de la Tuishia de la Nuba Garibat al-Hussein. Y ahí precisamente reside el problema.
The problem, I suppose, is when if I read out that lovely Arabic phrase to you, that no one really understands what it's all about, isn't it? Everything has an explanation, and we're going to give you an introduction to Al-Andalus music. We're going to try and enlighten the structures, the history and the culture for you. And we're going to talk about the concept of the music, first of all, the historical origins of the music, the philosophical content of Al-Andalus music, the structures, the text, the instruments, the current position of Al-Andalus music, and give you a very short list of books and records. If you're interested, don't worry, it will soon be over. The concept then is the Spanish, Muslim, Andalusian mix there of music, although not everyone agrees exactly on what word we should use in Spanish, música Andalusí, but it's all about going back to the year 700 level until 1492, when the Arabs, the Muslims, came to Spain. So Al-Andalus music is probably the best way to describe it, because it really refers to that particular period of history in Spain, which was known as Al-Andalus. We're not talking about a specific style or way of performing the music. It seems that everything that sounds that's Moorish may be Al-Andalus music. It's not like that at all. This is a very specific, concrete, palatial, courtly music. It's not popular. It's not traditional culture. It was music that was played in a court setting, in palatial buildings for the important people at the time. It's studied at the moment in music conservatoires in the Maghreb countries and Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia and Libya. In those 4 countries considered the main style that's taught. Now, despite what I've just said, that is actually studied music in music conservatoires, it's really oral music, and until the 20th century, really, it was never transcribed onto paper. It was just sung. And nevertheless, we can tell lots of stories about the oral tradition, how it's developed. It's certainly subject to change, because it's all passed on and conveyed by word of mouth. However, the existence of a set structure respected by all people playing this music and singing this music can take us back to a point of origin. In countries where this music is performed, you can see that the people have tried to stick very close to the origins and maintain it. This is an orchestra, beautiful orchestra from 1931 in Algeria, showing you an example of people playing it. And here's a map showing you the Al-Alah music. That's Northern Morocco style, Rabat. There to the right, I'm going to show you all of this, the Garnati style, between Morocco and Algeria. Tencent in Algeria. The Sanna-a, which is the true Algerian style. That's the 3rd circle there for you on the map. And the 4th one is Al-Malour, the Constantine, Tunisian, Libyan sections. As we start moving further east, the style becomes more Oriental as well. The experts coincide in the fact that the Moroccan style is perhaps the prevailing one. If you go back to the historical origins of this music, Zirab is the person really behind it all. Everybody is familiar with him. In 820, he reached the Cordoban Caliph's court. The story is that he was a follower of the maestro, but his professor really got jealous of him and said, "It's time for you to leave," and he sent him into exile with a bag with him. Otherwise, he was going to get rid of him. And he came over, and he has left certainly a legacy behind him. Sirab was a man of his time. Supposedly, he knew 10,000 songs. He was the person who brought the customs of the court there. He was the trustworthy companion of the Caliph at the time. People say that he even brought the asparagus. He was the person who had an influence also, and even haircuts that were worn at court. But modern researchers, such as Christian Porcher, say that he was not so important, that he's more of a mythical figure. He's a legend more than anything else. In 1956, the Al-Tifas manuscript appeared. This is a 13th century Tunisian transcript text, which has a less emotional view on perhaps how this Spanish Muslim Al-Andalus music tradition started up. Supposedly, 2 centuries on from the arrival of Islam into Spain and the arrival of Zirab, the music evolved in a very specific direction, picking up on the Balag school, and subsequently Al-Andalus music evolved in different phases. The Ibn Baya, Aman Patha, 13th century Saragothan imams who also managed to support with all of their artistic skill this tradition. I don't want to go into too many historical and technical details this evening, but let me say that today there are just 2 of us here playing on the stage, but sometimes there are even 6 of us playing, and we tend to take 2 or 3 days to really tell you everything in a talk like this that we'd like to. Don't worry, we're not going to do that. But a Nuba, a Moroccan Nuba, by the way, can last between 6 and 8 hours if you sing the whole thing. The whole suite is never, ever, or almost never performed in full, but we're trying to compress everything to give you a very brief overview. We could say that the Al-Andalus music repertoire was created on the basis of popular songs and melodies to be sung before the nobles in the court. The musicians tended to be slaves, the men and women, and they had to just stand there and wait to be called on at any time during the day and night to perform this music for the rulers. They could be singing in the baths or in the gardens, or follow their hosts with their guests. Sometimes they would even be able to sing to such an extent, and they would be able to be given so much wealth that they would be able to buy their own freedom. We'd like to really look at the sparkling side of Andalus music and singing the Alah, or playing Alah. It's from the Nuba, it's from the Algerian tradition, it's a palatial version, it's a happy one. We were listening to a Moroccan piece before, and this is Algerian now.
يا لا 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 أهني يا لا 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 وغرامي ممكن ألا علي نحو Alina ya la 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 sarientaka ya la 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 mani ya la 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 dujeni winsami balu Ali hijima la 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 nsali binur ya la 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 عيني يا لا 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 وراقبي ننقي وقدالو صدي ساقا يا فرحتي oh يا لا 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 oh يا لا 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 قلبي شارع يا لا 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 نقيم له يا لا 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 حندرا يا لا 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 وراكبي بعيد لا برا
Muchas gracias, muchas gracias. Siguiendo el índice que nos hemos...
Now we've set ourselves an index, and now we would like to talk about Arab music and Andalusi music. It is based on philosophical elements which connects the spiritual world with the physical and daily world. Although there is no real scientific proof for this, history tells us that there were 24 pieces of the original Andalusi repertoire, that is 24 for each hour in the day, that is for different moods, different music for different times of the day. So there are 4 main modes, however, that are united to the 4 original chords of the original lute. Each one had a different color and was directly related to one of the parts of the human body and to nature. Now, Alice Chotin, in a book published in the 40s, gives us a table under the title "The Lute and the Harmonies of Nature." It gives you information on each chord, the signs of the zodiac, the seasons, the northwest, the different fluids of the body, of the human body. And we try to find a cosmogonic result where music is just a whole, a part, forms a whole. Now, the first one, the first chord, which is C, is yellow and is do. The next one is red, called magna, and it is sol. Mahla is white because of water, and it was re. And the fourth chord, bam, black, a black chord, and refers to earth, to the earth. And then again, we can see Thiria as an important figure here. Although there is information about lutes with more than 4 chords, even in the 9th century, it was said that Syriap added a 5th chord to the lute, and it had to be made of lion's cub tripe, and it was supposed to represent the soul. So we can listen to some of the compositions of each of these modes or moods, some that go with the blood, sanguine humor. These are festive rhythms, and others that are more violent, the phlegmatic ones, which refer to fog and immobility, and the ones related to Travilus are reflect anguish and are dark. Although the Al-Andalusi music is considered Western music, it is generated in the Maghreb in the West, but the origins are very much in the musical bases of the Middle East, Syria, for instance. Before talking about the structures of Al-Andalusi music, let me show you something from the Algerian repertoire, Al-Rashim, Al-Fatim. In the Algerian tradition, there are some shorter nubas, which are really the ones that are played mostly for general public. So this is one of these tunes.
Sabemos que es una pesadez aguantar las afinaciones, pero es mucho peor aguantar las canciones desafinadas. Eso es horroroso.
يا رشا الفتى يا قريب بالباب ارحموا الولهان لينحوم بالله ارحموا الولهان لينحوم بالله. هنت بالأشواك يا قهير الباب فتنة العشاق تمنع وسلا فتنة العشاق تمنع وسلا. الوجود قد لاح كوكب وحده بل بلا الأفراح هيتهم تتلى بل بلا هيتهم تتلى أوفي لي أحدي يا هلال سعدي لا تهون وحدي باسمك العلا لا تهون وحدي باسمك
Como no nos va a dar tiempo de ninguna manera a ver la
I
totalidad
don't think
de
we'll
las
be able
cuatro
to
tradiciones,
look at the forced traditions which we've just introduced to you. We'll really be focusing on the Moroccan tradition, which is the closest to home. Now, Nuba, the Nuba is really the most important rhythm, and it means turn or order in which each musician waited for his turn, or the possible hours of the day, or the sequence in which these nubas were ordered depending on the time of the day. These are vocal instrumental suites. They have a prefixed structure, but they also leave a lot of room to improvisation. The Nuba is the sort of central unit, and there are 11 Nubas which still exist out of the 24 that existed originally. Each Nuba has five movements called miyasin or Mizan. Each Mizan is then structured on the basis of short introductory pieces. We had the Salchalia, which is the introduction, and after that we had a Tuisiya, which is really the introduction to the entire Nuba. And here, this is a table which I would really like that all you're going to be listening to this afternoon. It's very difficult to keep all of the structures in your head, but you must understand that this is structured music. This is an edifice which is extremely complex, and I very often relate this to the just like all Al-Andalusi art is sort of is a part of a whole. It's a structure which is almost like a piece within a piece of architecture. Now, the Nuba, which we are talking about here, is the lover's Nuba, which is really the Nuba, which is when the lovers need to part in the morning. And then we have the dawn Nuba. You have them all actually on paper and actually on the screen as well. Now, they all have a prefixed structure, which they have in common. And there's no real reason when Christian Pochet gave us such an exact one. Pochet actually says that the Nuba is based in a series of movements which cannot be changed, and the acceleration creates new rhythmic forms which are codified and metered and they're not left to any kind of hazard. So it is improvisation within a structure. So in broad terms, I think we could say this in the following way. We could summarize it as follows. You've heard the lamsalia, which is something a little diffuse, something you couldn't really define. Each and every one of us were playing a different instrument, and the room somehow is filled with the musical mode. It's Mshalia means literally is a kind of flow. It's the flow of the Nuba, which is an introductory rhythm, which is free. And then you have the tuisiya. The tuisiya is an instrumental part with fixed melodies and a fixed rhythm. And then you have bubya, which is almost as if it were an intention. It is an instrumental part with a fixed melody, which comes close to the first movement of the Nuba. This first movement is what we call the Basit. That's the first Mizan. Basit, which basically means simple. And within this movement, which is like a movement in a symphony, the allegro, the adagio, this first movement is then made up of an introduction, a tuisya, and then it has some sanas. We'll take the Nuba Ribat al-Husayn, which is to be played in the afternoon at sunset. So we shall be playing this Nuba, first the Tuisha and then the Sanna. It's very well known. It's called Melihul. I will just translate the text for you because I have a friend who says, look, I don't know why people say that Arabic has 10,000 words, and I listen to Arabic and I don't understand a single word. But so the text reads as follows: the kind face which I describe as beautiful has burnt my face and is soothed with beautiful words, and I enjoy looking at that I love.
مالح المهايا بوصف حسان يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا 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 في وصف حسان كوا قلبك يا قتلني عيان يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا 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 قتلني عيان بنار مردكية وحلوة لسان يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا 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 في في لساني آثرا يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا 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 هي يقول حديث ونقنع من أدرى في من قد هويت يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا لا 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 في من قد هويت كل الحبيل الذي يرضيه سفك دمي دمي هلال له في الهل وهرمي دمي هلال له في الهل وهرمي إن كان سفك دمي أقسام الرادكم فما غلا ندرة منكم بسفك دمي فما غلا ندرة منكم بسفك دمي عندما جئت لديار يلا لا يلا لا 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 وذؤم أي الهدن وفؤادي على الجمار يا لا لا يا لا 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 نارها تشعشع الوكو قلت يا قلبي استبار يا لا لا يا لا 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 الذي فلتواجه الركال تشاتكوا والو أي والو أي ندار أحد زاد فيكم سوال أي لا لا يا لا 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 ما يفيدني سوى الصبر
Gracias. Pues hemos hecho trampa porque hemos hecho dos sanas.
We cheated on you there. Actually, there were two sanas there instead of just one. You may have noticed then when we switched from one to the other. The second Mizan, the second movement is called Kaiwanis, which literally means 1.5 parts. Of course, it would start off with the Twisa, which is the instrumental introduction, and then the Sana. In this movement, you tend to get the Ishad as well. The Ishad is the free rhythmic soloist part. It has a set melody, though. It's very common, and everybody waits for this and expects this in Al-Andalus musical concerts, because when the soloist can really actually give free rein to their skills. We're going to play the Twisa with the Mizan, with the Sanna. It's called Al-Alah. It says, the darkness of the night, now depleting, disappears to the west. You are the light of my eyes, and you are the moon which is growing into my happiness.
نسيم نسيم الصباح صباح مر وقسي ربو الكرام الكرام عني كل لروم مرحبا مرحبا يا هلا وفا وفا والدمام والدمام لساني ذيبا سلامي بياسكا سلام غزالي منى راحتي نور عيني لال إلى سرعود السرعود أشل ما تطول ريابتي لبنا مسار يرعون.
Gracias. Muchas gracias, muy amables.
Thank you.
Son muy generosos.
You're very kind, very generous. Thank you very
César
much.
Carazo.
Luis Delgado.
Applause, round of applause for César Carazo.
Bueno, tras esto todavía quedan.
Well, after that, we've still got quite a lot left. We would have the third mitzvah, which is called Batayi. What that means is elongated. Once again, you'd start off with your twisa of the Mizan and the Sannas that are part of that. What we're going to do then is going to play one of the most known Sanna, which is Leili Lashib, which means marvelous night. It's the most sweetest night. We don't want the God to come back. The full moon has actually aroused my passion. Oh, moon, full moon, you give rise to my desires, and I am lost.
ليل عجيب ليل عجيب عجيب ما كنا الله يلالين يلالين ليل عجيب غاب الركيب لا رده له يا لا لا يا لا 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 غاب الركيب وادج الحبيب وادج الحبيب يا سعد من ده يا لا يا لا وادج الحبيب بدر التمام بدر التمام قد حجت أشجاني هيا أشجاني يا كدي هيام يا كدي هيام للعتشك الفاني يا لا لا يا لا 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 يا كدي هيام أنت على من المنى يا لا يا لا يا لا 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 ومن الماء يذهبوا يا لا يا لا يا لا 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 ومن الماء يذهبوا يا لا يا لا يا لا يا لا لا من كل طيبي يا لا يا لا يا لا 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 تعب لي نفسي تطيبو يا لا 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 تعب لي نفسي تطيبو يا لا يا لا يا لا يا لا لا يلتفت يا لا يا لا يا لا 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 عن حديثك ويعجب يا لا يا لا يا لا 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 قد ملأهم روى استوى يا لا يا لا يا لا 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 ولوعي وفكرتي يلا 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 لا يا مناي مالي دوا يلا 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 لا 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 إلا وصلك يا بريتي يلا 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 لا 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 إلا وصلك يا بريتي يلا 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 لا
Muchas gracias. Gracias. Bueno, ahora vendría el cuarto Mizan.
Thank you. This would now bring us to the fourth Mizan, which is called Berit, which is like the final part, because at a given moment in time the Nuba stopped here and it didn't have any further movement, so this was like the final part. And then we'd have a Tuisia and the corresponding Sannas. But in this particular case, in this part of the Nuba, when we talked about the Nishat, the vocal solo, we also have what we call the taksim, which is a solo of one of the instruments in the orchestra. I will give you a very short taksim. The longer the taksim, the more beautiful they are. And it is a pleasure to listen to. But I do a very short taksim for you here.
Muchas gracias. Probablemente alguno en medio de la melodía que ha sonado habéis reconocido.
You may have recognized this melody. You may have recognized it. What is this?
Es el himno español, ¿no? Es la marcha real, ¿no?
It's the royal march. It's the Spanish anthem, really. There's many theories about the origin of the Spanish anthem. It appears in 1771. It talks about the drums played by the infantry, Spanish infantry, drums and pipes. And there is this particular partiture, which is in this particular book, and Manuel Espinosa would be the composer, 1771. This melody, as I've played it, can be found within the Al-Andalus music, perfectly fits in. And some people say that this tuisha of the Al-Istiqlal Nuba, and therefore one considers this from Ben Passe, and that would be the origin of this particular anthem. But that would be crazy, really, to say this, because there's not a single piece of paper referring to the compositions of Adam Pasha. So there's very little you can really say about this. You can't say much about what Ibn Bayat really composed. And you don't know how this music is now present, and it is within the Al-Istilal Nuba. And of course, there are similarities. Well, I leave this doubt out in the open, and I think it is perhaps a bit little adventurous to say that this was written by Ibn Passa in the 12th or 13th century. Now, this brings us to the 5th Mizan, and that really would be the entire Nuba, the Kudan, which would really mean the one who's at the front, which means really the end, and would also have its tuisha and its sanas. And here at the end, to close this nuba, you would have the inshiraf. These are sort of accelerations which you get at the end of the sanas. And generally everybody knows them, everybody loves them, everybody knows them by heart, and everybody sings them. So that is what we see at the end of these of this Nuba. Now you can see that each and every one of these parts is made up of several Sannas. This evening we've played several Sannas, and they correspond to the same structure. This is a structure. It starts with the first verse, and then you get a sort of replica, instrumental replica, a second verse, and again an instrumental, very ornamental with a lot of rhythmic variations, and then a third verse, which is stuck to the kursi. The kursi is almost as if it were the seat of this particular piece of music. And it has a variation with several instrumental replicas, and then at the end you'd have the inshirat, which is this very fast ending, which then links up to the next Sanna, or to the actual end of the Mizan. We'll just do one Sanna. Well, we promise we'll only do one Sanna, and this, what we're going to be doing is not as if this is the normal thing to do. It's almost as if you're cutting at the top and at the bottom. But the Sanna that we've chosen, and you can imagine that Al-Andalusi music, just as the English verbs, is full of irregularities. There's a lot of theory there, but then there's very many exceptions. This is a typical Sanna that we shall be playing. Seydi, do whatever you want. You cannot reproach anyone anything. And here, he is just our messenger, but he is jealous. And despite all of this, my love is stronger and stronger. It goes beyond what is normal. The fire is burning my entrails. Okay.
سيدي أنا نفعل ما تشاء أنا ناين أنا ما أنا سيدي غيطان أنا ناين أنا واو يا قد علمت أننا الذي وشاء أننا في حديث أننا وفي الجمار أننا قاصدون أننا بين المشاعر أننا لم يكون أننا رند هشام أننا ذاهما يزداد ذاهما يزداد جاوز المعتاد جاوز المعتاد مارو في الهشاء أنا ناقد كتاقات أنا ناري أنا ركاد Oh, yeah, la la, yeah, la 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 la, yeah, la la, yeah, la la, yeah, la 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 la.
Muchas gracias. Así es. Como decía, la interpretación de una nuba tiene una
As I was saying, performing a Nuba can take approximately 6 hours, and of course this is rarely done. These works were not created to be played the way we're playing them tonight in an auditorium when you have people sitting there, just sitting there listening to the performers, the musicians. As I said before, it's very likely that these works were played for hours and hours during some festivity. They took hours to get to an end. Then they could be in large rooms or small ones, but in some Palatian buildings that we read that you would have perhaps instead of ensembles, you would just have a couple of musicians who would be stuck behind some sort of screen so they couldn't be seen, and they would be the people who'd be performing these at the time. Apart from the rigid structure surrounding Al-Andalus music, I can assure you that it's wonderful to be able to let yourself get carried away by the rhythms, the musicians who share the repertoire with the listeners. Really challenge each other. They can really take risks, and it's quite an adventurous thing. Because if the rhythm actually drops or diminishes, then of course it's the ensemble that has to pick it up with percussion. Percussion, really, everything's hinged around the percussion. The audience usually is familiar with the repertoire, and this all forms part of cultural heritage. Of course, it's the legacy, and it's music that you might hear played or sung in a wedding or in a baptism or festivities, and people know the most difficult parts of the song, and are delighted to hear when the singers can get through these difficult parts in the songs. I have to tell you, if you're fortunate enough to go off to Morocco, to Tunisia, or wherever, please do try and go to a concert. There are lots of different associations that put on these concerts, and also restaurants. It's just like here in Spain that you may think, let's not go to a tablao and see a flamenco show because it's for tourists, but do actually pick up on those experiences. It's the cradle of real music, even flamenco here, that you will not find bad musicians at all playing Al-Andalusian music, because it is a high caliber musicians that play this. It's challenging. So let me go back to the sequence. I was explaining the structure of the music, wasn't I? I want to just talk to you very briefly about the texts, first of all. If there is information there that makes us think that the oral tradition rather evolves and changes, well, yes, that might be the case, but it's not really the case in the written text. The fact that people are singing at birthdays and different festivities, well, that's because everybody in their own libraries or in the bookshelves have the text. It's almost if people would tell us that famous regional song like Asturias Patria Querida was from a famous author. Well, it could be the case here that we have a poet who would actually be behind them. From the 6th century onwards, fragments of the Nuba started to be written down. The most popular ones, the most well-known one, the Kaluna al-Saik, dated end of the late 18th century. And there's a version supervised by one of the great masters, written in classical Arabic, dedicated to the poetry of the Nuba, and it's the textbook really for all of the scholars in this type of music. There are some transcripts and some texts that have been conserved in public and private libraries, and the texts are constantly being studied by scholars as Manuel Espinosa, who has studied this in depth, and we're very fortunate to have his contribution. The thikhel, the mahashakha, the qasiyya are some of the poetic forms, and sometimes the barwalas, which are written in dialect Arabic, but these are the different forms that you might find there. The instruments. I don't want to take too long about this with these descriptions and explanations to you, but there are two sources really here. First of all, the surprising survival and persistence of some of these instruments is in the Maghreb, and then the Christian iconography, together with medieval imageries, these icons. Sometimes, if you see these instruments, it's almost like they were exactly the same instruments in those past times, and we're looking at them today. You might find them still in the marketplace. There are many, many different instruments that are used in Andalusian music in different periods through history, and perhaps different types of orchestras played them. They tend to be very big, these ensembles. If you go onto the internet, you can see that there are thousands and thousands of YouTube video clips with all sorts of performances every year, once a year in Casablanca. The Moroccan Crown brings together ensembles of 50 or 60 musicians. They're quite tremendous shows, and there's one great advantage of this type of music, and it's monophonic music. What I mean is it's not polyphonic. These are very simple single melodies that each musician can play in their own way. But it doesn't really matter then if there is one musician or 50, because the melodies are the same. It's not like Christian polyphony, and when you need the different voices, otherwise the piece cannot be sung because of the different melodies. The current orchestra tends to use Western instruments that have their heritage in the past. The cello, for instance, saxophones, for instance. All sorts of instruments can be used to perform this music, but there are some traditional ensembles that use traditional instruments. I have to start off with the lute, of course, which is the king of all Mediterranean culture instruments. This comes from Ouda, which means wood in Arabic. That's the very first appearance of it is this one. This was the brother of Haran II in the 10th. He actually got this as a present. It's a cylindrical box in ivory. As you can see, it's actually conserved in the Louvre. On the front of this box, you can see a miniature figure. It portrays a musician playing a tiny, a very short lute. And this is a reproduction by Eduardo Paniagua. Early on in the century, the lutes that we call the indigenous or autochthonous ones, the Amida, the Ramal lute in Tunisia and Morocco, they still played them. Then the Algerian version, the Koutra, but the Shaki lute, the Oriental lute, has been completely assimilated into this type of music. The distance between the strings and this part of the instrument is important. It's quite a vigorous musical style, the way you play it. The current lutes have 6 strings, double ones like the Oriental model, of course. We still have versions of the instruments I mentioned before. In the times of Alfonso X, in El Escorial monastery, there are some pictures, some paintings that show these instruments. You can see this fabulous Eastern lute. Look how big it is. It's one of their few instruments. You can see it there on the screen, which is actually, whoever's actually illustrated this, it's always coming off the picture, isn't it? It's so big that it doesn't fit. Let me now talk to you about the rabab, which is such an exciting instrument. The rabab is an instrument that has been preserved in the Maghreb. This is a photo of it, and this is the rabab in the old-fashioned musical settings. This is a very peculiar instrument. It has 2 thick strings there, and the distance between the strings and the top part, you can hardly have a finger fitting in there. if you gave a rabab to a traditional player now, they would say, no, there's no way that you can actually play this. There's not enough room for your fingers here. It's like a souvenir, because someone today would probably think that you have to actually press the strings down against the instrument, the diapason. But we know from our research there are many different ways of dealing with music and playing it. And the rabab is played in a different way. You don't actually press the string down against the diapason. It's a tangential music form. You can't play long stretches, but there's a very special sound that comes out of it. It's, despite it being so small, too short, it's very expressive. It really has a very different role to play than any of the other instruments in the orchestra. These instruments are so important. Many of the top conductors of Al-Andalusi music have always played the rabab. The next instrument I want to show you is the tar. This is the Moroccan tar. It's very similar to very small tambourines. It's the smallest tambourine that you can find amongst all Arabic countries. You just play it with one hand, and if you look very closely at it, you can see García Barroso made a study on exactly the rhythms and the forms. It's pretty broad, pretty wide. Why? Because what you do is actually bang it onto your own arm, the way I'm doing it. That's why it's quite broad. It's a very small instrument, though, but you can play it with one single hand. The canon is the next instrument I want to talk to you about. It's an instrument that's only very recently been included in the Moroccan repertoire. It existed in the Oriental repertoire, but the archipreste de Ita talked about the small canon. We found a small one not long ago in the marketplace of Soko in Fez, which is one of the big centres of Al-Andalus music, and we found a very small example which made us think about the half-sized one that the archipreste talked about. And in fact, if you look at these pictures here, the traditional illustrations of musicians, you can see an example of this very small one. I know I'm taking you through this very quickly, but let me also talk about the darbuka, which is also a very recently incorporated instrument. These are Oriental, with very bass sound because of the way that they have plastic. I mean, this is what happens now, but this is the traditional one. This is a pure Moroccan version here that's in Fez Museum. And if you look at the shape, how it sort of bulges out with the narrow part there with the skin that is stuck there. Fortunately, because of tourism in Morocco, you can still find these. They're not really used in orchestras anymore. It's very difficult. There are some musical groupings that play them, but even so, they still sound good. And fortunately, the plastic versions, the souvenir types that you find anyway, have not actually taken over completely for them. There's one type of darbuka which you can see in Alfonso X's drawings, which you play on your shoulder, and some of the musical associations, as you can see in that photo there on the screen, still use them. Very few examples, archaeological examples, have been kept up to now. We had 3 or 4 examples, one in Petre in Alicante, and another one in Castillejo de las Juarez in Granada. There was another one in Valencia, another find there, and there was another one. There was a ship that was sunk off the coast of France as well. But lately, recently there was discovery, and it was like light flooding into a room. Almost 100 of these tanukas were found in a site in Zaragoza. We're very excited about this because this is an incredible discovery of these remains. These are reproductions of the ones I was talking to you about before, but these are the original ones, because out of the 100 pieces that have been discovered, at least 20 or 30 of them are in perfect condition. And there has already been an exhibition held in Zaragoza of that find. These danukas are very, very small, actually, even though they look big on the screen, and they're related to the hawassi and the hual. They used to be played by the musical associations, and they played in one hand, and the rhythms were played by the different musicians and came together as a whole. I want to finish off with the viola or the rimanta. The current one actually replaced another string instrument which was probably used in the 19th century that was more local, more autochthonous. The instrument is gone, but the way it was played, the medieval way, is still used. You can see the capital there, and you can see in this sculpture there of how the instrument is played on your knee. It's quite a show when you see this, because the musician doesn't just use the bow to actually find the strings. He moves the instrument itself, and sometimes it pulls the instrument away, and you get this noise. It's a very swift movement. It's quite an impressive thing to see when you see a musician play this instrument. And this is really bringing us to the end of the concert. But let me talk to you about current times of Al-Andalusi music, which is, as in any traditional music, oral tradition, it is actually re-emerging. When some of the experts disappear, the maestros, you find a new generation coming along, and nevertheless people say things will never be as they were before. Of course, that's the case. As Joaquin Diaz said, tradition is a river. We see the river, but it's the same river, but never with the same water in it. So names like Abd al-Rais or Mohammed bin Al-Ansi, Zamani, Atashakara, and so many others have fortunately left us recordings. Their voices can still be heard. Matalutiwi, so many of them. Or Ahmed Satun Sihwari, and tomorrow actually, today's the 19th, isn't it? Now, he is the veteran for the Tangiers orchestra. He's, how old is he now? 80-something, I think, 84. And you should see him, the way he's dressed in his traditional clothing, and how he's there at the rehearsals day in and day out. Of course, we will never be able to go back to those times when people used to just gather together as musicians, and they used to fight together about where they were sitting and who was playing right, and the atmosphere was completely different. Now, of course, Al-Andalus music is played up center stage now. There are still these Oriental influences, but there are Western influences too, of course. It hasn't been able to keep away from those influences, but oddly enough, we do have new performers. The tradition has continued, and there's tremendous interest in this type of music outside the Maghreb, in Europe, with record labels interested in this. There are the Noma label in Spain is one example, and there's a very short bibliography here for you, and discography for you. You can see the different records. You can see the records there of the three, the Tetuan, Fez, and Rabat schools that have been published on the Noma label, and that's run by Eduardo Paniagua. And to finish off, even though it's not there on the screen, I think I have to mention, of course, the Malatine, which is published by Maison de Culture du Monde, which is like a suitcase, 11 boxes, each of the boxes 6 or 7 records. It's a really comprehensive set. Taking through the books, I've just given you some that you can easily find. You can see the past and present of Al-Andalus music, Manuel Contes. There's another one by Christian Pochet. A lot of these are on sale probably here in the book. There's one, Al-Andalus music in the Maghreb, and there's a recent one that's been published by Mizan. If there's anything that's clear after this avalanche of information for you, if there's anything that's quite clear, or should be clear, is that Al-Andalus music is very concrete. The repertoire is highly defined, and as I said before, it's not about the way you perform or the way you play it. Quite often you see adverts for Al-Andalus music or dance, which is not at all like what we've been talking about tonight. You might see a YouTube clip and it says Al-Andalus music, and you just see a quartet, a string quartet. Then it's nothing to do with that. So these creations, therefore, where are we going with them?
I always want to refer back to an example of the end of the 19th century, where we have what we call the neo-mudéjar architectural trend. We have many examples of this. We have a lot of buildings in Spain, the station in Toledo, and other buildings such as the Casa Árabe. Oh, yeah, I haven't got there yet. I was just referring to the bullfight ring, Las Ventas, and the Church of San Pedro of Teruel, that is also mudéjar. And then this very beautiful building, Casa Árabe. Of course, this could not be in a better place because this is certainly an example of neo-mudéjar. So for all these reasons, we use neo-andalucismo as well as a term. These are artistic manifestations based on Al-Andalusi music. We ourselves have been working on this for many years, so with one hand we study the traditional texts in the best and most purest possible way. Don Emilio García Gómez said that we would never be capable of playing Al-Andalusi music, and he's right, because you got to be from Morocco, from Algeria, or from Tunisia, but to be able to play it properly. But we do what we can. But we also play the new neo-Andalusian music, revisiting this entire aesthetics. So we're going to conclude with a work of Yusuf al-Barbarilla, a poet from the south, from Malaga. And we've also brought some records which are in the shop, because as Amancio Prada said, well, if you like it, buy it, because you're not going to see it on TV or anywhere else either. So I hope that you have enjoyed the music. I hope you have enjoyed the explanations, and thank you very much.
Vamos a hacer una piececita de Umala bin Yusuf al-Berberilla, como os decía, es una poetisa de Guadalajara. Hay muy poca información acerca ¿El qué? Sí, qué maravilla. Está aquí el libro, qué maravilla. Profesor Sob. Efectivamente. No te había conocido.
I hadn't recognized you. I apologize. So Professor So has translated this, and he's opened the doors to us, because he's translated in the two languages. For us, it's really useful to look at the poetry in Spanish, but to have the original by its side, that is fantastic. Thank you so much, because you have been one of our references when we have worked on this. This poet, I prefer calling a poet poetess rather than poet, but I don't like to say trovadora, I prefer to say trovadices, but anyway. So let me just conclude by saying, all that comes from you is good, and with your glory, our eyes are fulfilled with happiness. Who lives without you will live in vain. Thank you so much, Master.
Allah, Allah, كل ما يصدر منكم حسن 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 وبيليكن تحلى ثمن وبيليكن تحلى ثمن تعطف العين على مندريكم تعطف العين على مندريكم تعطف العين على مندريكم تعطف العين على مندريكم وبذكركم تلدوا الأذن وبذكركم تلدوا الأذن من يحشنكنكم فيه انربي من يحشنكنكم فيه انربي فولي بيننا مني يبنو فوني فينا مني يبنو كل ما يصدر منكم حسن كل ما يصدر منكم حسن كل ما يصدر منكم حسن وبيليكن تحلى ثمن وبيليكن تحلى ثمن وبيليكن تحلى ثمن وبيليكن تحلى ثمن وبيليكن تحلى لا زمنون
Gracias.